This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
To get a transcript of today's show, plus all future transcripts emailed to you, go to offthechainshow.com.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
I want to talk about vaginas, mostly because I find them fascinating. But actually, there's this show, this production in town called the Vagina Monologues. And all the old fuddy-duddies are freaking out about this, up in arms about this, which I haven't seen the show. Do you know the show I'm talking about?
I've heard about it, but have not had the desire to explore it.
I have no idea what it's about, but it does. I mean, the name creates some pretty interesting mental images, the Vagina Monologues. My first question is, well, who or what is giving the monologues? But the reason I want to talk about vaginas is because I think we men should strike up conversations with women we don't know. I mean, just walk up to somebody at the mall or at the gas station, or at the supermarket, and just start asking them questions about their vaginas. I mean, after all, it is our right to know. Supposedly, I mean, that's what I'm picking up from this article I read about this lady in New Hampshire. So she's enrolling her kid in school, and I'm going to give the name of the elementary school, just because if anybody has their kids going there, you should pull them out immediately. Aiken Elementary School in West Hartford, Connecticut. So this lady and her husband are handed this big packet of forms to fill out, and they start answering these questions. All of a sudden, this woman noticed this one particularly weird, alarming, personal request for some very personal information. Here was the question. They're asking questions about her son, and all of a sudden she gets to type of birth, vaginal or cesarean. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So was your kid born through your vagina, or did they hack a hole in your stomach and yank him out? Because we need to know this. And so she puts the kibosh on that and says, that's none of your business. And she's up in arms about, I mean, this kid's going into kindergarten and they want to know this stuff. And so, I'm trying to figure out what is the correlation between her vagina and putting her son in kindergarten. So here's what the superintendent of schools there in West Hartford has to say. His name's Thomas Moore. He says, this question has been on our questionnaire for at least 20 years, and thousands of people have filled it out and not noticed it or brought it up. Well, yeah, they're freaking sheeple, man. They're the bullet catchers, enrolling their children to be future sheeple and bullet catchers. Isn't that what you public school people are doing? You're training an entirely new generation of people to be sheeple and bullet catchers, good little soldiers that can't think and only follow orders. But by the way, public school is a misnomer. I like to refer to it as government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. So this guy continues. He's a piece of work, man. A sheeple amongst sheeple. The last thing I want to do is make people feel that their first time with our school is in any way intrusive. What? He continues, I don't believe it was anything nefarious when the question was first asked. Dude, your entire system is nefarious. The question wasn't nefarious. Yeah, the question wasn't nefarious. What you're doing to kids is nefarious. Public school is prison for kids. It trains your kids to be in prison. That's what it is. I mean, this is amazing. It's amazing people lie down and take this shit. Even worse, they submit their kids to it at an age when these kids are still incredibly impressionable. I mean, most kids exist in the alpha brain state all the time up until about age 7, which means you get a kid from the time they're born up to age 7, you can totally program them however you want, which in the case of the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camps is to train them to not be able to think for themselves, only obey orders, because that whole system was designed just to produce sheeple and soldiers. It was designed to produce people for the Industrial Revolution who were nothing more than cannon fodder, man. You're just going to turn a wrench mindlessly, and that's all we want you to do. We can't be creating this generation of thinking people because, my God, they won't want to sell their life for a pittance turning a wrench if they can think. So I did make notes for this, and I'm totally going off script because this particular thing fired me up. Like, you want to know if my kid was born vaginally or through a cesarean? You intrusive idiot. I mean, you need to know this because it's important to his proper conditioning as a no-thinking sheeple who will only be used on the front lines of war to catch bullets because that's the only thing we train people for. Listen, yeah, I guess you can tell I'm a little passionate about this.
A little bit.
Perhaps. A little bit. I guess, so I'm a little bit passionate about it because at this point in my life, I refuse to buy a house in the U.S. because I don't want to be complicit in sending innocent children to jail. When I used to look at my tax statement, on the residence I owned, it would, like, a majority of those taxes were for public education, which means I'm paying for the privilege of other people's kids to go to school. I take it back, not privilege. I'm paying for other people's kids to go to a government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. Only a small percentage of those went to services like police and fire and stuff like that. So listen, I challenge you. We talked in the previous podcast about guarding the portal to your mind and really scrutinizing everything you're letting in. Have you ever done that for the school system you're sending your impressionable young minds to? I'm going to tell you, there is nothing good that can come from sending your kids to public school. It is an evil system. Its stated goal was to do nothing but produce soldiers who couldn't think for themselves. I mean, because it was the people who started the public school system in the U.S. went and studied the Prussian system. When the Prussians got their asses kicked by Napoleon's army, they're like, well, why the hell did we get just slaughtered? And they figured out, well, because the soldiers are trying to think, and they're thinking people instead of just responding. We need people who can't think for themselves. We just want people to respond. And boom, so the Prussians instituted a system to condition young minds to only obey orders and color within the lines. And cows are always colored brown, never purple. Never purple. You stay within the lines, damn it. And you will do this between these hours. I don't care how bad you have to pee. It's not bathroom break time. It's prison, man. And so that's what the Prussians did. The Prussians did a great job of producing sheeple, no thinking sheeple, little future soldiers. And that's the entire system that the U.S. public school system is based on. So I challenge you, evaluate what's going into the portal of your children's minds in the public schools. And I'm not even going to get into all the other stuff they're exposed to just by their peers. Imagine your kid surrounded by a bunch of other little sheeple. It ain't positive, man. I challenge you to pull them out of public schools. It's poisoning their minds and souls. Listen, so very few people ever overcome this conditioning, this early conditioning. I think of everybody I went to school with. I don't know anybody who has overcome it. They're all little color within the lines, no thinking sheeple. Nobody has ventured outside the realm of average because that's what they've been trained to do. It's the very rare individual who can overcome that powerful of an indoctrination. So it seems to me, again, I'm an expert about raising kids. because I have none. So it seems to me people are abdicating their responsibility to raise their children. They're just like, oh, well, I'm just going to hand them over to the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. That's my sheeple voice, by the way. To the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. And they'll be there, between 7 and 3 every day. And, then we'll have the 3.8 minutes of meaningful conversation a week. And it's like, and this is accepted. It's accepted that the state threatens you with criminal charges and threatens to throw you in freaking jail if you don't send your kids to the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. And everybody just accepts this like a sheep. I'm amazed at this. So how about this? Here's an alternative, just a crazy idea. Again, I'm an expert at how to raise your children because I got none. So how about this? You teach them to read and write and then allow them to educate themselves. Listen, the education you can get online these days that's available to you is as good or better than any of the most respectable institutions out there. I mean, that's what I did. Okay, so yes, I did graduate from the Barberton, Ohio government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. But after that, other than taking some classes at a community college, because I was broke, my family was broke, I just educated myself. And I wasn't too long in the process when I figured out, you know what, I think I better educate myself in something that earns a lot of money, because I'm watching the sheeple, the people who are following the system they learned in the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp, and their lives suck. And they're like reaching the end of their life after slaving away as a slave, literally, selling their time for dollars to a boss. And they're broke by the time they're dead. They're broke. They're all broke. So it didn't take me long to figure out, well, I think I should not follow that system. Duh. I think maybe I should educate myself in something that has a high value that people will pay a lot of money for. So I'm just going to encourage you to take a look at the information and conditioning that's being put into your children's minds. And perhaps that's something you should not abdicate. And Jonathan, I'm catching you before you adopt and before your child is of school age. Yeah, I'm pretty opinionated by this, but I think like the ultimate last option should be public school.
Here's the thing, Dan.
Did you go to public school?
I did go to public school, and I've never talked about this on the show, our show, but I've talked about it before, that I was kicked out of Catholic school when I was a kid. I just barely squeaked by middle school, and I was nearly below a D average in high school, and I actually didn't graduate. I didn't walk with my class. I had to take summer school to finish my half a credit that I needed to graduate. I was a terrible student. And all of that has led me to the idea that I don't want to send my kid to school. And my wife thinks I'm nuts, and I'm going to play this episode for her. But that's exactly it, because the school is made for creating factory workers and bullet catchers, as you said. And they just want these little mindless drones. And that is the reason why I wasn't able to make it in school, was I wasn't one of them. I could never be one of them, and I wasn't ever going to assimilate, so fuck them. And I'm not going to put my kid in that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let them take him and mold him. That's going to be my job. And whether it's good or bad, I'm going to be the one responsible and accountable, because that's the way I live.
Hell yeah. Now you're speaking my language. It's funny. So yeah, all the most successful entrepreneurs I know, not all of them, many of them never fit in the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. They didn't. The smart ones figured out real early, why should I apply myself? This is ridiculous. This is bullshit. They're just training me to be a mindless drone. I'm not going to apply myself to this shit. I'm just going to do what I have to do to skate through this thing, to keep them from sending me to jail and keep them from sending my parents to jail. So I guess I got to attend, and they did the minimum until they could get out or drop out.
Boy, we're tearing apart the public school system, school, and everything else today. I love it. These sacred lambs are being slain.
We are slaughtering the sacred lambs. You know, and don't get me started on college. Now, I don't have any resentments or bitterness because I couldn't go to college. But boy, that seems to be another huge impediment to really making a lot of money is college. Because, I mean, as if the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp wasn't enough indoctrination into you must do it this way, don't think for yourself. College is like even more the same, but at a higher level. And you're paying for the privilege to do it and leaving, in many cases, 6 figures in debt. And you're at that point, these young minds are so stuck in a box. Really, it's the extremely unique individual who can think outside of that, you know, who doesn't just, oh, well, I guess I'll go get a job as an accountant, you know, and stay stuck in that old dead model and die broke. Very few people ever overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, you're worn down years and years of all the elementary school, years and years of just being worn down and ground down and fit into this box, and then you come out and you can't think and you can't produce, and you wonder why the hell you're another statistic. Yeah, exactly. And people in this country used to be independent. I mean, Ken McCarthy wrote a great article back about, you know, in 1776 when the U.S. declared its independence from, geez, I forget the details. Was it France? Just kidding. So when they first declared their independence, like 99% of the people were themselves independent. You know, they had a profession, a business that they practiced themselves. Nobody worked for GM back then. You know, now the tables have turned. It's like 99-1. Everybody doesn't want to think for themselves. They want this alleged security of getting a job with the big company. And by the way, there's no security. There never was any security in that. That was all an illusion. The only security you do have is in your ability to produce. And it's, in my most humble but accurate opinion, if you're going to produce, maybe you should learn something that you enjoy doing and rewards you well for the time invested, instead of you just trading dollars for hours for 40, 45 years, only to die broke at the end of that period. Little hoe. Yeah. Hours for dollars. Good stuff, man. You got me fired up because I'm obsessed with this now, too. So thank you for that, Deanna. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will be back in your earbuds next week. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, to get a transcript of today's show emailed to you, go to offthechainshow.com.
This is the podcastfactory.com.